Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list for patch 11.9. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Stop by the stream. Starts every night around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. Usually go till about 2:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then I'm going to be doing some fresh patch notes and tier lists for every patch. And we have lots of individual champion guides, topical guides like best one tricks, how to macro better, how to micro better, my thoughts on the proposed changes to dodging, and much, much more that we're constantly adding. So be sure to check all that out. We had been covering some Total War Warhammer as well. I hope to get back into that very soon. And I'm also going to be covering some classic WoW Burning Crusade with some fresh guides and some fresh content for that if you're interested in that. So lots and lots of stuff coming up on the channel. And still, as always, tons and tons of League, as I said. So let's go ahead and get in here. All right, so I think that the meta will shift a pretty good chunk in the next patch because primarily of some of the items that are going to be moving around and how I think it might affect the jungle. So we'll see. But the major item changes are going to be Turbo Chem Tank going from 60 to 40%. So this is going to be a lot weaker on champions like Rammus, Udyr, Skarner. I don't think it's going to affect that much of support. You know, support set, really like that item. And there are a few other situations where you might see like a Leona or a Rel or something get that. But most of the time, they're just going to get Locket, and Locket's going to be similarly strong. So I think it's mostly going to affect the jungle and maybe some top laners. That's something to consider. Deadman's Plate, that nerf is a pretty big one. I mean, losing 100 health is about 260 gold worth of value. So again, the same people that got Chem Tank usually got Deadman. So Skarner, I don't think Rammus got it, but Udyr. So these are primarily targeted at Udyr and a couple of other people. But there were some supports that would get this item. So Tank Malachi would get this. We'll talk about that later. He was a pretty niche pick. Not a lot of people got that. And you would see that as well on Bard, was very popular. So Bard's probably going to take a little bit of a hit on that. Moonstone Renewer changes. Now this one is going to be good for anyone that wants Renewer. I still think that Shirelia's is going to be kind of top of the roost. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The win rate's just so much higher than Moonstone. It doesn't require as much ramp up. It just works, you know, a lot of the time. So it's really good. Sunfire Aegis. Now this is one that I think is going to be a lot more meta defining than people might think at first, and we'll see. Maybe it doesn't play out the way that I suspect it will, but I think this is going to bring back the big tanks. So not just like the speed tanks with the skirmisher style and the split pushing and the 24/7 ganking, you know, the Rammus, Udyr, Skarner, that type of stuff. But this might bring back the Sejuanis, the Nunu. Now, Nunu has still been really good the entire time. People just haven't been picking him. He did like to get Deadman second, but he can go Spirit Visage or some other things, and he can still gank pretty well. But Sunfire is going to be, this is going to be very, very good on the big tanks in the jungle. So if we see more big tanks and we shift to more of a 5v5 team fight meta rather than a skirmisher meta, which is I think where we're going to go with the nerf to all of these mobility items, then that's going to make enchanters a lot stronger. So that'll come into play here in a second since we get to the tier list. But I think that's about it as far as a couple of supports that are noteworthy. Lulu, these are really big buffs on Lulu. So her cooldown on her W, that's the polymorph and or the movement speed, whichever one you choose. It's the movement speed and the attack speed. And they're giving the attack speed an extra 5 at lower rank, so it normalizes later. But typically you max this second, so it's going to make it a lot stronger from like levels 7 to 13 or so, which is when most of the game's probably going to happen. Because a lot of games are over by the time you're level 13 to 15, most of the time anyway. So that's a pretty big buff, especially this cooldown is a huge deal because that's a really, really powerful effect that you want up very often, especially with how much CDR is in the game. Or ability haste. And then Tarik, I don't think Tarik's going to matter. It's possible the Q is a lot cheaper mana-wise, and you do want to spam that quite a bit. Usually, you know, in a fight, it's just Q, auto, auto, Q, auto, auto, Q, and then, you know, you can weave in your W and your E whenever it comes back up. So maybe this will come back in. They did buff Frozen Heart a while ago. That's an extremely good item, at least in theory, on Tarik, because he loves stacking armor. He loves the ability haste, and he also loves the mana, and he wants to be in combat, you know, taking hits, so he benefits personally from the armor. not only in terms of scaling, but just so he lives, right? So I don't know. Maybe we see some more Tarik. My problem with Tarik is he doesn't buff up his teammates as much as something like a Sona or a Lulu or even a Janna, and so I think that he falls behind in a lot of team fights. But if you do have some hard engaged tanks on your team, if you have the Sejuani, you have the Nunu, you got a Zac or something like that, and you pair that together with Tarik and you can walk him up and hold him still during his ult, maybe it's strong enough. Or, I mean, maybe Shirelius is a lot better than a lot of people think on Tarik. Yes, you're not going to be as tanky. Yes, most people go lock it. But the fact that you can continually crank out those W's, means that you can keep that movement speed up fairly often. It does have a 4-second internal cooldown, so you can't permanently keep the passive movement speed up on Shirelius, but maybe that's good enough to make him work. I'm not sure. So I don't expect him to be really huge in the meta, but maybe he can surprise us all a little bit. I think I actually forgot to put him on the list there. I'm just so used to him not being as relevant, but I'll tentatively put him up here near the top of B tier, but he could be a little bit better. Okay, so let's get into the tier list proper here. So I think that Recon is still going to be number 1. I think I had him number 1 or number 2 last patch, and as always, his win rate's not going to reflect that, right? Because he's very difficult to play. You have a lot of decisions to make with him, and if you screw up, you're going to die. So he's very squishy, and you really have to use his mobility to maneuver around fights and really choose your points to go in and go out. But he does have that flexibility. He does have the versatility of engage or peel. He can build semi-tank items. He can build full-on enchanter items. But he's very, very good with Shirelius, and so that's been one of the big buffs for him. Is he's always liked items like that because he needs to get in close so he can use his W, and then he also needs to be able to get back out really quickly. And you want your allies to be able to follow up, and it's such a huge deal because if you just run in there by yourself with your R and then you W in and your team is not close enough. Not only can they not follow up on your engage, but if they're really far behind, then you may not even be able to E back out. So you're going to die almost instantly, and you're not going to be able to buy enough time for your team to get in there. Versus with something like a Leona, you can go in a little bit earlier and just soak some hits for a little bit, probably while your team catches up, if you can't, find the picture-perfect engage. But this helps out a ton with Recon, and it's, statistically his highest win rate item by quite a large margin. And the stats are so good for him, too. Like, he scales really well with the ability power, the health, the ability haste, the mana regen. I mean, just everything about it is just built for Recon. So, really strong champ. And then he has lots of great secondary options in terms of his flexibility. A lot of times you want to go Zeke's because these stats are really good on him again, right? And it does give you that little bit of extra health and armor so that you don't get blown up because you will get hit when you go in. Your base stats are not that high most of the time, so just having that little bit of extra survivability is nice. And the fact that you can immobilize multiple targets with your ult allows for people to land some of those extra empowered hits. Now, do note, if you haven't bought Zeke's in a long time, that it does scale off of your ability power and your bonus health now, so that is pretty handy. So if you stack ability power, that's nice. The other thing is people have been doing Staff of Flowing Water, and this item is particularly good on Recon if you can get away with it, and I say that because it has no health on it, no armor, so if you're doing really well where they just don't have a lot of damage on their team, they don't have many assassins, it's just a bunch of tanks or something like that, then this could be good. And it's because of the way that he engages. Usually he will E in first, to an ally, or at least you have that option to E to an ally and then R and then go in with your shield. Because you really want to be able to maximize Staff of Flowing Water, you want to be able to buff an ally first and then go in afterwards with the Staff of Flowing Water so that you get the 20 ability haste on your ultimate. And of course he's going to love the ability power. You don't have the movement speed anymore, which kind of sucks, but having the 20 ability haste on your ultimate is super good, and on your shields are pretty nice as well. So it's a good item. I don't think it's as good as it once was, although statistically it's about the same, but it's still a pretty strong option. And then in a team fight scenario, if you can get away with it, then Redemption is another one that's going to be really solid. Just good all-around stats, nice healing. So yeah, several different options. You can get a Mikhail's too, especially at higher elo brackets, if you can really take advantage of that cleanse effect and your allies are going to play around it very well. then it can be pretty strong. So I think the Recon's going to be fantastic in this meta, but you got to have practice on him. You got to be good. Okay. Lulu's another one, and she's getting directly buffed on this patch. Moonstone's getting buffed, which a lot of people will probably still get on her. And some of her favorite teammates are getting buffed as well. So, like, Kog'Maw's getting buffed. That's a huge boon to Lulu. And if you start seeing more sort of frontline tanks rather than divers and flankers, then it will empower some of these stand and fire champions because they don't have to worry about getting flanked as much if they have a proper front line. So that would be Jinx. She's very good with Jinx. Now, Jinx is getting nerfed a little bit on the Rockets, but I think she'll still be good next patch. Kog'Maw's still good. I think Twitch is very underrated and can be good with her. So I think there are a lot of good hyperscaling options. Vayne is actually quite good with her, and Vayne is very good at taking down tanks and pretty underrated right now as an AD carry. But if you can get through the lane and not get bullied out, Vayne could be fantastic in certain metagames. So Lulu is just really, really strong as an enchanter, and I think that she has the most offensive tools, and that's why I like Lulu in a meta that's dominated by enchanters. Usually Lulu's near the top of the list because her passive ends up giving you like 80 damage on attack, like in the mid game off of just like an item and a half, which is obviously huge on champions that are going to get like some really big attack speed steroids. They're going to be stacking Zeal items, or they're going to be taking lethal tempo or something like that. It's just going to be a very, very strong synergy. And also, if you combine that with your W, which gives even more attack speed, so you get more passive hits, and if you put Ardent Sensor on her, which is also really common, that gives even more attack speed and even more hit damage. So a lot of these things synergize very well together to make her one of the largest enablers of hyper carries in the game. And you get that movement speed off of the W, which is really nice for repositioning for some of those fairly immobile champions like the Kog'Maw, like the Jinx, like the Twitch. This gives them that little bit of movement speed to kite or to run people down a bit more. And it also gives you a really nice engage option if you want to throw that W on like a Darius or something like that to just allow him to go in there and start tearing people up. Or if you still see Udyr or Skarner running around, Rammus, excellent combo with Rammus. So she can enable engage, she can enable hyper carries. She has a really good point-click ultimate on a low cooldown, which knocks people up. So that's going to be really solid with stuff like Samira or Yasuo. And then also applies a really nice slow. So if you put that movement speed on someone with the W and then you have the R on them as well, then it's going to be very hard for them to get away while they're slowed. And it is an infusion of health, so it's not affected by grievous wounds. So that's very, very strong, obviously, in a lot of scenarios, especially if your team has a lot of healing in there. So it doesn't gain any benefit from plus healing and shielding. So that's why I think the new Moonstone is not as good on Lulu as the old one, because the only thing that benefits from plus healing and shielding in your kit is your E, which is okay, but it's not phenomenal. And that's why I think that Shurelya's is just so much better, and a lot of people just are not building that item on her. But look at the difference here. It's almost 56% win rate versus like 51.5, right? I guess so it's a 4% difference, 51.5 versus 55.5. And it's because a lot of people are just in you build Moonstone on Enchanter State of Mind, but I think Shurelya's is so much better because you have multiple items, or multiple abilities. 3 different abilities can trigger that extra movement speed, right? Your W, your E, and your ult all empower an ally and allow that movement speed. And then this gives you a better engage, which once again combos together with your W, with your R, and just gives you a lot more game with some of these bruisers. And it makes you safer, right? If you're just kind of caught out in a bad situation, you can just pop your Shurelya's, pop your W, and just run away, right? So I think it's fantastic, and it has the exact same stats. It's still got the ability power, still has the mana regen, all of that's the same. You're just giving up sustained increases to your plus healing and shielding with a little bit of extra healing in exchange for lots of movement speed. So I'd rather have lots of movement speed, and I think it's going to be that way on a lot of enchanters. It'll surprise you just how much better this item is on many of the enchanters out there. So I think she's phenomenal. She personally doesn't scale as well with plus healing and shielding for the reasons I just mentioned as someone like a Sona or a Janna or a Soraka, but the amount that she scales up your allies with all of the attack speed buff and the on-hit buff is really good. And she has an excellent just point-click W. So it gives her some really nice game against assassins as long as you don't get it like Windwalled or Master Yi Alpha Struck or Zanya'd. You know, there's some counterplay to the W because it's a projectile. But in a lot of situations, it just completely dumpsters divers. So you have like a Riven trying to run in at you or a Diana or whatever. You just polymorph him Echo. She's phenomenal against Echo because when he's polymorphed, he can't use his ult. And a lot of Echoes try to run in and, you know, do some crazy assassination on the back line and then ult back out or tower dive. She can just say no to that with a point-click 2.25 second disable. So it's just very, very strong, very versatile champion. I think her win rates, it's going to go up about 2%. It might even go higher than that if people figure out that you should be running Shrelia's instead of Moonstone. But yeah, very, very strong champion right now, especially if you build her the right way. Okay, Sona's another one who's coming up pretty quick, and she's one of the biggest gainers of the last patch, and I thought she was going to be pretty good with the Moonstone changes, but what might, because she scales so heavily with plus healing and shielding, because her W's have very low cooldown, and team fights can affect, you know, all 5 people. It's like thousands of value in healing and shielding. But what might surprise you is that Shurelia's is actually the best item on her. And that's what a lot of people wouldn't suspect. Look at this differential again, right? That's like almost 3.5% better Shurelia's is than Moonstone. And that's because, again, Moonstone just requires so much setup. Shurelia's just works, and movement speed is an incredibly powerful stat. Now, all of your auras count as empowering allies, so it will give them movement speed. So you can double down on the movement speed with your E if you want, but you can also just use your W or your Q as well. Remember, it does have an internal cooldown of 4 seconds, so it's not just permanently going to be up if you spam your auras. But it's going to be up on cooldown pretty much all the time. So I think that's really good. And similar to Lulu, this is both offensive. You can help the Darius get in there, or the Udyr, the Rammus, or whatever, but it's also defensive. It allows you to get away from hot situations. And that's something that has really plagued Lulu and Sona, is that they're extremely vulnerable, especially on rotations. When you've got Udyrs and Skarners and Rammuses, you know, running around everywhere with turbo chem tanks, you just can't get any vision down. You can't rotate. It's just extremely dangerous. It's a bad meta, right? Lulu and Sona want to sit there and just hang out and have a nice beefy front line with protection on their flanks, good vision, and they just do a clean 5v5 fight over an objective or even an ARAM sometimes, and it works out, right? So they do not like the skirmish meta. And like I said, I think we're shifting perhaps away from the skirmish meta more into a team fight centric big tank meta. So we'll see. I mean, people in solo queue don't like playing big tanks, so that could be a thing. Maybe, you know, even if Sejuani's the best jungler, which I don't necessarily think she's going to be, but even if she was, a lot of people would not play her out of principle. They'd still just play, you know, Lee Sin and Kha'Zix and stuff like that all day. So we'll see how it shakes out, but I think she's in a really good position if we start going towards that team fight meta. Very good with Shurelia's, really good bully in the laning phase, excellent abuser of Ardent Sensor, pretty good with Staff of Flowing Water too, because you can use your W, empower allies with that heal, and then you get the 20 ability haste on your ultimate, which does allow you to make some plays. Now, it's not the best playmaking tool in the game, but it's a better playmaking tool than something like Lulu's are. So it's nice. It's not as good as Seraphine's ult, but I would argue that Sona in extended fights is going to put out a lot more power than Seraphine. I know that people like to compare the two, but I think that Seraphine is much more about longer, higher impact cooldowns, and Sona is much more about repeated buffs to your team, and really winning that sustained game. Because this, like, the W gets down if you get enough ability haste, especially if you're taking like Staff of Flowing Water and Ionian Boots. You know, you can get this thing down to like 3 or 4 seconds, and it's just constant shields and healing, and it's just pretty much impossible to beat her in a 5v5 fight if she's got 2 items, if you don't blow her up immediately, especially if she takes exhaust or barrier to go with that. Now, you still do want to take Airy with her most of the time, just because your Q is so valuable with that in the laning phase. It's free poke, and it can just wear people down. But if you're up against a lot of like hard dive or assassins or whatever, I mean, Guardian is not completely ridiculous. You could go down, you know, with Guardian to get revitalized, and then you could get like biscuits and free boots. I don't think that's terrible. That's what I recommend on Lulu. But on Sona, just because it's guaranteed poke, you can't miss it, and you really want the mana early, and it's so easy to stack mana flow band, that I would probably just go with this build. But yeah, so really strong champion, very squishy. You don't want to play this into Leona or Blitzcrank or something like that. But if you're against another enchanter, maybe if you're against a Lulu, or if you just have a couple of tanks on your team, I think that she will be particularly strong, especially like maybe gold and lower, where people just won't pressure her enough and she just gets to scale. I think she will be very good. And then Leona's up here. Not a lot new on the Leona front. I have her up here because she is pretty good against all three of these champs. I think Recon's kind of a skill matchup, but I'd say your average Leona versus your average Recon, Leona will probably end up on top. Although I think Recon does have a lot of outplay potential if you're more experienced on Recon than the Leona is. But she's really good in these champs. I mean, if you ult like Lulu or Sona early on, then you can pretty much one-shot them. So she's very good early if you can snowball on them. But if it goes late, and they get 2 or 3 items, or especially if they get a Mikhail's, and that's definitely on the table for Sona, that's going to make your life really hard. So Leona is good, and especially if they pair her together with some of these immobile hyper carries, the Jinxes, Twitch. Vayne's actually pretty good against Leona, but like the Twitch, Jinx, that type of stuff, Kog'Maw, then she's going to be very good. Now, a lot of times people will take Cleanse against that, but that means they don't have Heal. So you might have even more kill potential in the laning phase if you sequence your spells correctly. Don't, stack your stuns. You wait on them to cleanse and you stun them again for at least a partial stun. But anyway, so she's pretty good. She's got nice engage. Not really affected by a lot that's going on in the meta. She's still just going to go lock it. Most of the time, lock it Zeke's. So it's just, going to depend on how much pressure you can put down early. Okay. And I mean, she might even be higher, right? If instead of going towards heavier tanks, people just go towards more assassins. If people are just like, hey, there's no Udyr, there's no Hecarim anymore, so I'm just going to run Kha'Zix every game. If that's how people want to go, which is possible, then you would definitely see Leona as sort of the premier engage, or one of them. Okay. She doesn't rely on Deadmans or anything like that either. She just has really good long-range engage with 1100, so doesn't need Chem Tank, doesn't need Deadmans, so still going to be really solid. Okay, Soraka is another one that has gone up quite a bit, and again, I thought this was primarily because of Moonstone, and I think Moonstone is a little bit better on her than it is on Sona, at least when we're comparing it to how well does Shirelia's do. Alright, so let's pull her up. Because she gets a massive benefit from the plus healing and shielding. Because she has a really big heal, on such a low cooldown. It's like a 2-second cooldown. So, it is very nice. But, actually, it is. Shirelia's is way better. I thought it might be like 1 or 2% maybe better. But it's one of the biggest spreads we've seen so far, right? It's 4 or 5%. Again, same principle, I think. It's just... That's right. Anytime you heal an ally, now she does get to double down on the movement, right? Because if you hit your Q, you heal an ally, that speeds you both up, and then that'll speed you up again with Australia's. Oh, there she goes.
Where's she going?
Yeah, you want to go see where she's going? Where's she going? Remember, you got to be quiet and slow and use gentle hands. But yeah, I think the name of the game is just safety, right? Again, the main way that you lose a Soraka is you get flanked or you get caught out in a rotation or while you're warding, and this is going to give you... Oh, good job. This is going to give you another get-out-of-jail-free card every 90 seconds. So, really powerful effect. Still has pretty good scaling. Not as good as Moonstone, but again, if you just go unchecked, you're going to dominate the fight. Just like Sona. If the fight goes for 5 seconds, you don't get blown up instantly, you win, because plus healing and shielding is just so powerful overall, especially if you're healing a Sejuani or a Zac or something. They're never going to kill them, even if they have grievous wounds. So, very, very good at the long con. Now, her harassment is not as guaranteed as Sona's in the laning phase. Sona's, you can't miss it. It's just point click. It just auto aims to people. So, I think that you can actually go for Guardian a little bit more to get more of that personal protection. And then I would probably just get free boots plus biscuits, or maybe Cosmic Insight if you're not against a poke lane. They're going like Nimbus Cloak and Celerity. I don't know about that. I mean, Celerity does kind of make sense if you're like with Shirelia's. and with your Q, so maybe, but I still think the value of the boots are nice because that allows you to spike up and gets your next couple of items 300 gold faster, and she scales super well with items because all of her items are very cheap and they all stack multiplicatively with each other, so I think she's going to be pretty strong. It depends on how strong Grievous Wounds are in the game. If you're the only person that has significant healing on your team, then I think Soraka's going to be a better pick because then they have to go further out of their way to get Executioners versus if your team already has Red Kayn, Swain, Vlad, you know, that type of stuff on your team, they're not going that far out of their way to get Grievous Wounds. They're going to get it anyways. So you always want to, if possible, pick Soraka as a lower pick and make sure that it's going to inconvenience them quite a bit to have to get Grievous Wounds. So I think that she can be extremely powerful in the right situation, but you know, you can get run over too, right? If you just get like turbo camped and they have a lot of engage and a lot of damage early, you blind pick her and then they pick like Draven, Leona, or something like that, or Tristana, you know, Tristana, Thresh, or something like that, then you could be in big trouble. What is it, Roy? You want me to pet you?
No, I want you to pet the kitty.
Oh, we're petting the kitty. Okay.
I hope you want some.
Good job. In just a few more minutes here, because I do have to head over to a student conference, and I would like to keep this around 30, so I'll just hit kind of the highlights here. Malachi, like I said before, I think the tank version is really underrated. A lot of people are sleeping on it. Deadman's is getting nerfed, which was kind of a cornerstone of that, and Abyssal, so that build might be dead. I just don't know what else you would substitute in, because he really, really needs that movement speed. I guess you could go Shurelya's maybe on him. You would be a little squishy to start, but maybe you could get, I don't know, just a tank item second, Zeke's, or maybe just like Redemption. If they don't have a super heavy damage team, maybe you could just go Shurelya's Redemption and try to do it that way. I don't really know, but I think it's probably going to get a bit worse. It was pretty good this patch, like 52 or 53%. I think the tank version is, or the AP version is still on the table, maybe. If you go more towards the assassins, so like the Kha'Zixes and the Lee Sins and stuff like that, it's good, but the AP version is not that great against tanks. It does have, you know, percentage damage if you get to Demonic Embrace, but they're going to be able to shield and just heal through and just kind of laugh off a lot of your damage if you're up against tanks, or if you're up against a shielder like a Soraka or a Lulu or something like that. They can just shield a lot of your saplings. Not all of it, but it's definitely going to take some bite out of your... Oh, you want Daddy pet you? Okay. So yeah, we'll see. I think he'll be a little bit weaker though, but there might be some circumstance we're going to try him. Okay, Thresh. Now, Thresh, it's a skill matchup on Thresh. Now, he's not losing too much because he just goes Locket Redemption anyway, so he's all good in terms of the new items. But historically, I don't think he's as good against big tanks. Okay. Historically, I don't think he's as good against big tanks because he can't get access to that back line. He really doesn't have a great way to dive late game. Like, how are you going to stop that Kog'Maw Lulu or that Jinx Lulu? You know what I mean? Like, you have to catch him out. Like, if you get really good vision and you get a nice hook from the darkness and they're out of position, sure. But if you're staring them down and there's that Sejuani's just standing in front of them, or the Rammus or something, like, it's going to be rough, right? Versus Recon, you can, you know, maybe find a situation where you can flash in and W and knock up that back line. Okay. Okay. So, like, you're good against squishies in the early game if you can land your hook, or if they don't respect your flash flay and you have a really aggressive partner who's on board with it. So if you have like a Tristana and you flash flay as Thresh the Lulu and then Triss jumps on him, yeah, you can snowball hard and get a lot of kills. But it's kind of like Leona. I feel like you have to snowball. Now, Leona can get to the back line because everything that she does can go through the tanks and you can lock up, you know, backline people. But Thresh is just a bit more conditional, right? His only real engage is its hook, and it's slow. It's got a half a second wind up. It's got a slender hitbox. So it's hard to do it unless you're out of vision, unless you're in a bush or something like that. So he's okay. He still has good items, but it just depends, again, on how many tanks are coming in. Oh, you want her to sit down? Okay, there you go. So, we'll just see. But, I mean, if you're good on Thresh, you can always make him work, right? He has so much utility. He's very good at peeling. If you do want to play something against Leona, he's very good against Leona if you think that she might just snowball too hard on you early. If you play, like, Lulu, Soraka, or Sona, then Thresh is still going to be pretty good. So, pretty good. I just think he's going to get outscaled in a front-to-back 5v5 teamfight meta against Enchanter plus X hyper carry. But we'll see. And then Bard, I think Bard is going to get hit a bit here because, Dead Man's is not going to be as strong. I don't even know if it's going to be viable anymore on him, maybe. But, he does have some good opportunities to hit people with his ults. Lulu, Sona, Soraka, they just are really easy to kill if you hit them with the ults. So he's not as good against things like Leona because if you ult her, you don't really want to engage on her a lot of times if her teammates are around. But if you ult the squishies, it's good. Also, potentially pretty good against Kog'Maw or Jinx if they greed out and go for something like I'm blanking out, the 3-hit item or whatever. But if they have Gale Force, it's really, really hard to hit your ult against a Gale Force target. So, like, smart players are going to run Gale Force against Bard most of the time. Okay. So, we'll see how it goes. I was a little disappointed. Everyone was running Gale Force, so you don't want to play him into something like Jhin, because Jhin is 100% going Gale Force, but, like I said, maybe the Jinx or the Kog'Maw greeds out. Okay. Maybe they get a little greedy, and don't get Gale Force, so we'll see. He's okay. He takes a lot of skill to play, and I just feel like he's a little too conditional, but he does have a really high win rate right now. It's usually just people that sort of one-trick him. He does have a really nice win rate and a 6% play rate, so I mean he's still pretty good. You could definitely make an argument to make him tier 1 if you wanted to, but I just got him down to tier 2. It'll be okay. All right, just a couple more minutes here, then we got to go. Yumi, I think will be pretty good here. Rory, Daddy's working, okay? Daddy will turn you around, but we got to be quiet, okay?
No, too fast.
But Yumi, especially if you start getting tanks, then I think Yumi can be very good. Okay, it's going slow, Rory. Yumi can be pretty good. So, more tanks is better for Yumi because if they're tanky, that means she's tanky when she attaches them. They are buffing up Moonstone. Now, I think you'd probably still go Moonstone. There is a chance that maybe she's going Shirelia's, or at least that it's a higher win rate. I think she can activate it. I think she can activate it while she's attached, although I'm not 100%. Okay, thank you. You want to go find Big Poe?
Yes.
Okay. Good job, Rory. She just wants some attention. I've been working on stuff in here all day. We need to go out and play in a little bit. It actually is. It actually is a higher win rate, about 4%. Well, 3% higher than Moonstone. So try it out. See what you think. I mean, just jumping around to allies in a team fight, that counts. I'm pretty sure that counts as empowerment, especially if you have Airy. I'm pretty sure that just jumping counts as buffing up your teammates. So it counts in terms of Airy. So I assume it would count in terms of Shrelia. So that might be a pretty good option. Again, it keeps you safe. If you get caught out while you're trying to ward, it can keep your allies safe. And Yumi's just really strong in general. If she can survive the laning phase and attach to a hyper carry, she's very strong, right? Because she gets their mobility, she gets their tankiness. If they can go invisible, like a Twitch or something, is phenomenal with Yumi. That's going to be very strong. And she's very fast to build up her core items because she doesn't have to get boots. So especially since they increased the cost on Ionian boost to 950, now you're saving 950 gold instead of just 900 gold. So I think that Yumi could be pretty good. Now, I'm not sure about the Staff of Flowing Water on her. I think it could be all right, right? If you just heal your ally and then press R, then you get the 20 ability haste on it. So that is nice. And you don't need the tankiness, of something like a Zeke's. So that is pretty handy. I think she's pretty underrated. She's actually harder to play than a lot of people think she is. That's why she has a low win rate. It's not because she's bad, it's just because she's very risky. It's kind of like Recon. It's like if you miss position or you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're gonna die, and that's pretty much it. And so the risk is you try to, maybe jump in and save your allies who are doing something stupid and they're about to die, and, any number of other random YOLO Q stuff. It's going to be rough. So she's not that great in a skirmisher meta. Usually, if you have a really fed, someone you can attach to, Master Yi or something, then yeah, she can be good in a skirmisher meta. But for the most part, you want to be able to... attach to people, and you want to be able to fight 5v5s. You don't want to be caught like roaming up and down rivers, or trying to ward by yourself, or any number of other things that can happen in a new Deer style YOLO Q, Clown Fiesta. So I think if we do get a more organized 5v5 with hyper carries, tank breakers versus big tanks, I think that Yumi's going to fit in really well, and she's particularly good if they happen to have like one assassin or something like that might take you out, or like a point-click champion like a Vi that otherwise might take you out, then she could be a pretty good pick. So I think she's pretty underrated. She doesn't have as much lane pressure as some of the other ones, but I think that she is still really, really good later on in the game. And that's going to be pretty much it for this video. So we're pretty much out of time. I do need to move on and go get that meeting here in a second, but real quickly, just Janna's okay. She just doesn't have any way to like speed up your ally or start fights. She has pretty much very low macro. She can move around really fast, so that is nice. But she doesn't have, like Lulu's W to speed people up, or Yumi's E to speed people up, or Sona's E to speed people up. So she's just very, very defensive. But if that's what you need, if you just need some defensive peel, then...
I don't know where Victor is.
You don't know where it is? Okay, well, we can find it in just a second. I think it was it downstairs near the TV? Okay. I'll look in just a second, help you find it. So she's okay. Nami's okay. Doesn't scale as hard as some of the other ones, but if you do have some, dominant laner, if you've got like a Draven or maybe even a Tristana or something, to be okay. And then I moved Blitzcrank up just a little bit, just because he is very good at grabbing those squishies, and he does have the horsepower. He pulls them so far out of position, and he does so much baseline damage, and he breaks shields with his R, that he can blow up the Lulu, the Sona, Soraka, all that kind of stuff. He can kill him. Versus Thresh is a little more dangerous. You don't pull him as far out of position. You don't do as much damage. But Thresh does have more versatility. So if you're the God Hand with Blitz, if you're always landing it, if you can sneak that in, get it past the tanks, and grab those squishy targets, I think he can be very strong. Okay, but that's going to be it for this video. Like I said, I don't want it to go too long. I do need to move on to another meeting, but we'll see how the meta shakes out. I think that it could be good for enchanters. We'll see. But I think Shirelius is going to be the name of the game on whichever champions end up being strong, at least in the support role. As I showed you, basically every single enchanter, even with the Moonstone buffs, I still think Shirelius is going to dominate. And a lot of people just are really sleeping on that item. It's incredibly powerful, and I think the champions that leverage that the best, like Recon, like Lulu, like Sona, might really surprise some people, and the win rates are probably going to go up as people start building the correct items. But anyways, that's it. Have a good day. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. You can follow me on Twitter as well, at the Strat Prof, the Strategy Professor on Twitter, just in case YouTube doesn't give you those notifications. I've had people telling me, even though they click the bell, they like, they subscribe, they watch a ton of stuff, YouTube may not tell them. So be sure to check it out on Twitter. I usually only post whenever I upload a new video, right? I don't spam with pictures of food or other random stuff, right? It's just the content for the channel that I post on there. So be sure to check all that out. But anyways, that's going to be it. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.